Our next speaker is here to talk about Brazil, and I know that over the course of the last couple of years there's been a lot of discussion about South America specifically as a social and casual game market because there were so many people there, and there were some challenges also associated mainly with monetization in that market more than anything else. And I will say that I've had some personal experience with this market over the course of the last 3 weeks. I have traditionally, for my clients, bought traffic from Southeast Asia as a test market when we're fine-tuning retention and stuff like that. And about 3 weeks ago, I did a test buy in Brazil, and I have been stunned by the response and by the quality of the customers that exist in Brazil specifically. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Julian Migura to tell us why.
Thank you very much. Hi everybody, thanks for showing up this late. I know you've probably been hearing a lot, so it's highly appreciated. I'm going to talk a little bit about 2013 as in being the year to bring your games in Brazil. So don't wait up for the Olympic Games. I'm going to start with a quick intro on the free-to-play gaming market in Brazil. There's a study that we've made last year, which is an internal study run by an organization called IBOP for us. IBOP is, for those that are German in this class, the comparable to GfK. Yeah, and they supported us with some findings there that I want to share. So Brazil is the fastest, or one of the fastest growing markets in online entertainment. From our finding, we now have 44, actually there's a zero missing, 44 million active gamers, and the growth rate is relatively stable with around 15% per year. That's our estimate for the next couple of years. About 55% of those would pay for originals if they were available. That's something that's obviously for free-to-play less of an issue, but that's especially from the console and box market, where a lot of titles are still not available, which is a really good chance for everybody that's doing online distribution. Yeah, and 55% as well is connected to the internet right now, which means there's still a lot of growth. 55% for Brazil means we're talking now about roughly 110 million. Actually actively using the internet on a daily basis, we're talking about roughly 45 to 50 million. Yeah, and 55% overall are connected, and the growth there is also relatively fast, and we're expecting by the end of this year to be around 60 to 62%. Gamers versus non-gamers, so 23% of the population on average by our findings are playing games. So that leads to 44 million across all platforms, and compared to the Newzoo numbers that we had for Germany, we're talking about 36 million gamers here. So that already surpassed, in terms of overall market size, that market. In terms of weekly spending, the finding that we had is that the majority is willing to spend up to 5 reais, which is around $2.50 per week. And then the middle class or medium chunk is willing to pay 5 to 10 reais, so up to $5. And more than 25% are actually willing to spend more than $5 a week on games in Brazil. Games per platform. You can see that tablet, though it's definitely much bigger than in the Spanish Latin markets, is still relatively small. Also portable games and smartphones, which is the third bar. And then you can see that PC and Mac and console are the two dominant markets in terms of hardware. However, console does not necessarily mean the same that you would be used to from from the US, Canada, or from Europe. It means, for example, Mega Drive is still relatively big. The PS2 is predominant, PS3 is really, really small in terms of market share. So just as in, it's especially on the console market, it's a couple of years behind. And the majority in terms of hours played is in the PC and Mac section, so on the computers. So people that spend more time playing games usually play on computer devices. On these devices, 43% play online games on websites. That could either be flash games or mini games or casual games, or they could be browser-based MMOs. 42% play pre-installed games, which is also interesting for you guys to know in terms of distribution options. And that's especially also interesting, even though that market is declining quite a lot, for cyber cafes. So it's always something that works very, very well for us, is that we pre-install a number of different titles in the major cyber cafes that we work with, to make sure that people can access them, since we know that 42% of the people basically play those games. And 40% are willing to download games from the internet, so that could be MMOs, that could again be casual download games, could be pretty much anything. So the best reach, but there's not much of a difference, is definitely with the easy accessibility, so through web games, but there's not that much of an issue. So once people are able and willing to access the internet, they're also usually able and willing to download clients if they're not too massive. As we've heard earlier, it's extremely important for Brazil to focus on, monetization-wise, on the right payment methods. I have a little bit of a study here. So this is what you're usually used to, especially from the US. In Europe and especially in Germany, it looks a little bit different, but nevertheless, that's the majority. And what we're saying is, especially with international cards, that doesn't work. Of all your traffic, even if you have an English-speaking game, with all the traffic that you have, with international credit cards, you can monetize around 5 to 6% of the volume that you could. That's our estimation right now. So you're missing out on 90 to 95% of potential revenues. Just as an example, we've been working with Valve, and we've launched together local payments in Brazil in November last year. And what you can see there is the share of payments for the whole year. So even though we've only been live with them for a month and a half, you can basically see that Boleto is very, very, very dominant in Brazil. The credit cards there are a split of international credit cards from the past and local credit cards that we added to the portfolio, and then other methods combined, which include different cash payment options mostly, make up to 20%. So at least the Boleto factor is extremely important. It's the single most widely form of local payment in Brazil, and there are similar payments also in the other countries of Latin America. So for example, in Colombia, there's a relatively similar payment which is called Baloto, but it's really the same as Boleto. Boleto is like a bank slip basically. So you order, you do your checkout. For those who don't know it, you do your checkout and you print out your order more or less, or your own invoice, and then you go to a bank and it has a little bank slip on it. They pay it for you, or they process the payment for you then, since you need to basically make sure that you convert cash. So rather than having in mind people that sit in front of their computer with a credit card, you have people sitting in front of their computer with cash. And then you need to find a way to get this cash exchanged basically into an electronic number that you can then put into your system. Since the beginning of the partnership that we had with Steam, the revenues have grown more than 60%, and the numbers of users have doubled. So you can see that it has a massive impact, not just for the existing user base, but also in terms of getting in new users. Because people will tell it to their friends that, hey, you can actually pay in this title with local methods, or you can actually pay in this product with local methods. It's something that's sadly still rare if you take the majority of titles. However, it's our job to work on that. Yeah, and our system is thus enabling Steam to better participate in the market, basically, or any other partners for that matter. The usage of payment methods in general. Now, the split for Steam is obviously a little bit different since it's not really a free-to-play MMO. But for actual free-to-play MMOs, that's the kind of split that we've seen. So as I said, Boleto is the predominant method. Cash deposits are also very important, simply due to the fact that Boleto needs at least 1 working day to be processed, and cash deposits need around 3 or 4 hours. So what people can do is they go to a bank without printing something, they deposit money in any ATM that has a deposit option or at a cashier, and then that will be processed to their gaming account accordingly. Online banking is existing as well. It's still not in the same quality or ease of use as it is in further developed markets, but banks are working on that. Also, not all banks support online banking yet, especially since Boleto is that strong and kind of does the same trick more or less. But online banking is of course instant, so it's much faster, and it's the best option to really monetize people if you want them to purchase something at this very moment. PagSeguro is an e-commerce system, is very comparable to PayPal, and it's also part of our group, and yeah, they're much wider used than PayPal, as you can see. Compra Gold is our own e-wallet system where you can basically buy PIN codes at local LAN houses, or you can buy prepaid cards in different retail stores. So that's used as well, but obviously Boleto is much easier since you don't have to go to specific POS in order to do the payment. And then, yeah, you can see the 2 international options, international credit card and PayPal, are far below. PayPal, we have PayPal active in our payment gateway, and we process around 0.5% of the transactions with PayPal. Yeah, why casual gaming in Brazil? It's still something that has not been explored that much, and it targets the mass markets much more than hardcore gaming. The core games have been out for a longer time there and have been working quite well, but the people that are now accessing the internet, due to internet access at home becoming more mainstream, or is especially the middle class, and it's a much broader audience, so it's people that might be more willing to actually play a more casual title than to really sink into like a hardcore game. Obviously you have relatively low advertising and distribution costs. You don't have the same kind of battle for gamers that you have in the more established markets, so it's relatively cheap to acquire traffic on CPA basis, for example. Since the growth of the connected households in general, there's still quite a bit of time that we believe that this will stay in that way. However, it makes sense to kind of access this pool of players that steadily comes into the market now, in order not to lose out to the competition doing so first. Why is Brazil interesting? This is the participation by country in e-commerce spending in the different Latin American countries. And you can see that Brazil is around 60% of that market. We don't have accurate numbers for this in terms of gaming, but we're assuming that it's very, very similar. And in terms of the turnovers that we've seen, or the transaction volume and numbers that we've seen in our system, it's relatively similar to that. So rather than dealing with all the Spanish markets combined at this point, it makes much more sense to just roll out in Brazil at first, simply because it's so much bigger in potential and in size. And it's also much bigger in growth right now. Nevertheless, Latin America, yeah, obviously Brazil heavily influences the other countries as well. Since there's a higher buying power in Brazil, they also import more goods. They go on vacation more, so they distribute more wealth across the other Spanish Latin American countries. Mercosur, which is comparable to the European community in the past, is welcoming new members. So Venezuela just joined in, which opens up new markets and which opens up new opportunities and lowers the basically entry barriers that you have to those markets. And then you can see that Colombia's economy grew by nearly 6% in 2011 and Peru's GDP by nearly 7%. So you have a very stable growth there as well. And some countries even have a higher GDP per capita than Brazil. So you can see overall that also Latin America is an extremely interesting market, though it's very much driven by the Brazilian economy right now. But we believe that as a second step, after focusing on Brazil, that after maybe 2016-17, the Spanish Latin American markets will be growing much faster than Brazil will at that point. That's all from my side in terms of a quick overview. Thank you for your time and for listening, and yeah, I'm happy to reply to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Julian.